해외에서 K-팝으로 시작된 한국 문화에 대한 관심은 클래식과 뮤지컬 등 여러 음악 장르로 이어지고 있습니다. 그리고 최근에는 국악에서도 두드러지는데요. 국악에 빠져 25년째 한국과 국악을 전문적으로 연구해온 힐러리 핀첨성 교수는 인디애나 대학에서 인류 음악학으로 박사학위를 받고 UC 버클리와 샌프란시스코 대학에서 공부했습니다. 그녀는 처음으로 신화위 판소리를 접했을 때 난생 처음 들어본 음색에 깜짝 놀랐고 리듬이 살아있는 자연의 소리에 빠져들어 전공을 받고 한국에 유학을 오게 됩니다. 국악을 공부한 그녀는 서울대에서 인류음악학, 세계음악, 한국음악개론 등의 강의를 진행하면서 국악 교육, 한국 전통음악의 연속성과 방향 전환 등을 연구해오고 있습니다. 힐러리 핀첨성 교수는 미국 하버드 대학에 초청된 강의에서 한국 전통음악의 정신적 뿌리라는 주제로 현재 세계에서 빛나는 K-팝의 힘이 뿌리 깊은 한국 전통음악의 역사에서 비롯되었음을 시사하며 세계의 이목을 집중시켰습니다.
So I'm going to start with a brief introduction in Korean. 안녕하십니까? 저는 서울대학교 국악과 교수이고요. 거기서 국악 이론 그리고 민족음악학 관련 수업하고 있습니다. 그래서 우리가 서울대, 특히 하버드, 브랜다이스 대학교 이렇게 이번 주 레지던시 할 수 있어서 매우 영광합니다. So my name is Hillary Fincham-sung. Thank you very much for that introduction. We're really honored to be here. It's been a wonderful week and a very layered week. And one of the main themes of this particular residency, and this is something that Judy Eisenberg really struggled with. What can I call this? And so she came up with this gorgeous title, Soundscapes of the Soul. And I think it's absolutely perfect. But we also study people's lives to better understand how they interpret musical sounds and how they think about music and hear music and perceive of it. So this is what I do. And one of the issues currently that we're very concerned with in ethnomusicology is soundscapes. You know, how do we create music that reflects our environment and also helps project the identity that we wish to project to the world? It's interesting because at the middle school in Waltham, we got the question, so these musical instruments are related to Korean culture. So I thought, at first I was like, well, of course, you know, and then I thought about it and it was actually a very, very good question. We have to think about, you know, why the instruments are constructed the way they are. Why does the voice project a sound that I would describe as very distinctly and uniquely Korean? And it's very much tied to ideas about aesthetics and beauty, but also the message that the music is meant to project and also the story that the music is meant to tell. So it's been our job this week to tell a multi-layered story and to talk about the many different layers and the many different contexts in which Korean music has developed over time and through space, but also how it exists today in the world. Sangyeon-san is a piece from the Sunbi or literati tradition. And the idea of being very expressive or expressing sadness or anger or a grievance very emotionally or outwardly is not something that is necessarily desired or considered to be very good for you, either as an individual in society. So music as a whole was said to be, the music that was condoned by the government at that time was supposed to be an example for the rest of society. And there was ritual music at court called aak. And so the ritual music was very slow, very stately, very impressive, very majestic. And so it kind of set the mood for court ritual and state functions. Another type of music that wasn't necessarily ritualistic, but was very much tied to Confucian ideals was called pungyu. Now this is where I get to syncretism, because pungyu didn't start in the Chosun era, the 14th century to 20th century. It actually started way before that particular time. Way before the Koryo dynasty, there was a period of time called the Three Kingdoms period, and there were three kingdoms. Among them, or actually there were four, but one is never talked about very much, but one of the dominant kingdoms was Shilla. And there were aristocrats in Shilla like there were aristocrats everywhere else. And in Shilla, there were a group of young men who were sons of aristocrats, and they were referred to as the Hwarang. So the Hwarang were flower boys, and they were given this name because they wore these flowers in their hair. But they were also pretty boys of the time. They were the metrosexuals, you know, of early Korean history. They were the predecessors of the K-pop 고민am that you have in Korea today. So this is the hwarang, and so the hwarang practiced a way of life known as pungnu, and pungnu means wind and stream, and it really draws heavily on this idea that we must use our bodies, our minds, our spirits to connect to nature. So the hwarang engaged in a variety of activities, from sports, horseback riding, archery, to poetry, calligraphy, and music making. And this was a part of life. This was a way of life known as pungnu, and music was just a part of this. And so there's an aesthetic that emerged at that time, and that aesthetic was naki pulyu e pulbi, this idea. It's not Confucian, it's not Buddhist necessarily, it's really Taoist in nature. But this Taoist idea was very appealing. So the hwarang existed and they flourished during the Shilla, and then time went on, and some people believe the hwarang kind of died out in popularity. And then you had the opening of the Chosun dynasty in 1392. And there were still the landed aristocrats at that time, and they were very interested in following the Confucian example. But they found pungnu very appealing, because the pungnu ideals also espouse things like respecting the king, even ideas about revenge. There was a whole hwarang aesthetic and moral code and commandments that this group of young men went by. And these ideals were very appealing to the literati, the sonbi, who were, pretty much in control of society. These were the people that were born into a status. They were the landed aristocrats, and they were the ones who were able to take the civil service exam so that they could then hold state positions or government positions. But in their spare time, they engaged in music making and poetry writing and calligraphy, and they practiced a lifestyle that they were calling pungnu. So this pungnu aesthetic thrived and developed very strongly still during the Chosun era. And so music was a very strong part of this. And so this is where we have this genre of music that I'm about to introduce, which is known as pungnu. Sangnyongsan is the very, very first piece. And the lyrics originally, there used to be a song that went with this, and the lyrics originally were Sangnyongsan bulbosai, And so we don't really know how the lyrics were sung or presented. We just know that there were lyrics. And it's really just about breath. It's about roundness. And it's about connecting to an inner spirit. This music is the ultimate meditation music. Pidi is a double reed instrument. It's a tiny instrument with a lot of punch. It has a very, very strong sonority, and so you might be surprised when he comes out and he plays. But this particular solo was developed specifically for the pidi to bring out the mellow characteristics of the instrument and to also really highlight the aesthetics of this particular style of music. So our first performer today is a wonderful pidi performer. 상영상 먼저 하는 거죠? Yeah, okay. I just want to make sure. We had a little bit of change in order, and I got my wires crossed. Our first performer is Seokju Lee. He is a wonderful performer. He is from a large family of musicians. He's been playing music since before he can remember. He's a specialist in Korean folk music, but also a gifted performer in all the genres that the pidi can play in, which is pretty much all the genres of Korean music.
이상 꿀튜브였습니다. 이번 영상이 도움되셨다면 구독, 좋아요 눌러주세요. 앞으로도 꿀튜브 채널에 많은 관심 부탁드립니다. 감사합니다.